I'm behind your back.
I'm behind your back.
When you find out not only who this guy, 25-year-old Hassan Jhangur, who comes from South Yorkshire, has just murdered, but also how he committed the murder, you will gasp.
My window photo.
And this is Hassan's dad, Mohammed Jhangur. He too had a part to play.
Yeah, but I opened the window, he's broken my window though.
Right, stand there.
The murderers that you're going to meet in this video act all aggressively and defiantly when they get arrested, or if not, they're all casual and cocky about it. When you learn, furthermore, the mainly random nature of the murders that they committed, you will hope to hell that you never come across anyone like them.
On the afternoon of the 27th of December in 2023, Chris Marriott went for what should have been one of many walks with his young family over the Christmas period, but he never came home. His life was tragically and violently cut short as he stopped to help a woman laid in the road.
In December 2023, Hassan Jhangur, 25, murdered Chris Marriott when he deliberately rammed his car into a crowd of people during a brawl at his sister's wedding reception in Burngreave, Sheffield. He literally made his sister's wedding a blood wedding. The incident took place in College Court in Sheffield, where the groom's family live, and the groom's family are the Khans. When I reference anyone with the name Khan, I'm talking mainly about the adult children rather than their parents. The two families, the Jhangurs and the Khans, were basically feuding, even though they had members of their family who were about to get married. But that was what the feud was about. They had disagreements over certain aspects of the marriage. And I'm sorry, but for the life of me, I couldn't trace the exact details of the details that caused the disagreements between the two families. Prior to the wedding, Amani had argued with her mother, Areece Lloyd-Hall, shortly before Hassan Khan, her husband-to-be, arrived to collect her from Whiteways Road. In the event, none of Amani's family attended the wedding ceremony, which for me speaks to the anger and resentment that Amani's family, the Jhangurs, were feeling towards either their daughter or their soon-to-be in-laws, or both. If I've got you hooked on the video so far, viewer, do subscribe, give the video a like, drop a comment when you're ready, and donate. Hit the thanks button below, I'll appreciate you. After the wedding, Amani and Hassan went back to the Khan family home to celebrate with other members of the Khan family. Hassan Khan himself went out for a while with his brother Hussein. While they were out, at about 1 p.m, Areece Lloyd-Hall, that is Amani's mother, drove over from her home to the Khan family's home area, first of all with her son-in-law, not Hassan Khan but another one, and then a second time with Nafisa, her daughter, Amani's sister. On each of the two occasions, upon arrival in the close, Areece Lloyd-Hall took out from the boot of her car black bin bags containing Amani's clothes and belongings and threw them onto the driveway of number 1 College Court, the Khan family home. Riyazat Khan and other members of the Khan family came out of the house, and an argument ensued between Riyazat Khan and Areece and Nafisa, the Jhangurs. This developed into a physical fight, basically, in the course of which Nafisa was knocked to the ground. On receiving news that his sister had been assaulted, Hassan Jhangur armed himself with a lock knife and drove to College Close and accelerated up the hill at speed. Seeing Risa Khan standing in the road in front of Nafisa and the other helpers, he deliberately drove into him before running over the group on the ground, trapping both Chris Marriott and Nafisa, his own sister who he had come to avenge, under the car and seriously injuring others. Chris Marriott suffered catastrophic injuries and died at the scene, having come along only to try to break up the fight and just calm everyone down. He was literally being a good Samaritan, a concerned member of the public. Moments later, a chaotic fight erupted. As people rushed into the street, Hassan Jhangur briefly remained in his crashed vehicle before getting out and confronting members of the Khan family. Hassan Khan arrived carrying a baseball bat, and in the ensuing fight, Hassan Jhangur stabbed him multiple times, causing serious injuries. Shortly after the stabbing, Mohammed Jhangur, Hassan Jhangur's father, arrived in a taxi. Before police arrived, Mohammed took the knife off his son and hid it in his own car. However, police officers soon found it. emergency services worked to free those trapped under the car. In addition to Chris Marriott's death and murder, multiple victims, including Alison Norris, Rizak Khan, Amrin Jhangur and Nafisa Jhangur, sustained severe or life-threatening injuries. Hassan Jhangur was arrested and charged with murder, as well as a number of other offences.
Real hand.
Yeah, but I opened the window, he's broken my window though.
Right, stand there.
I've opened the door,
You don't have to say anything, but it may have your defence to do without mention. When questioned, something that's held around in court, anything you do to me,
I'm behind your back.
I'm behind your back. 6-1 Tango. I've got one detained for driving this vehicle.
Brad, knife.
Got it.
I'll tell you at this point that I don't know the follow-up to this story. In other words, I don't know whether Amani and Hassan Khan remain married. I just don't know what relationships now exist between the two families. In his subsequent trial, Hassan Jhangur was found guilty of murder plus other offences, including wounding with intent. As you might imagine, the judge was full of reproach and condemnation for Hassan Jhangur.
As regards aggravating features of this offence, first, the use of the car as a weapon on the spur of the moment to commit the murder is a serious aggravating factor which warrants a substantial increase to this starting point. Secondly, the fact that Chris Marriott, a passerby, was engaged in the public-spirited and selfless act of assisting a young woman who was lying apparently unconscious in the street is a further aggravating factor of the offence. Moreover, the two further offences of wounding with intent and the three offences of causing grievous bodily harm with intent in relation to the four others that you hit with your car, that is Rizak Khan, Alison Norris and your mother and your sister, and the stabbing of Hassan Khan, warrant a further substantial increase in the minimum term.
Chris Marriott's widow and children are understandably devastated by the loss of their husband and father, respectively.
Bryony misses his smile, his laugh, his touch, his wisdom and his encouragement. He was her best friend and she's thankful to have loved him and to have been loved by him.
On the 6th of November 2025, Hassan Jhangur was sentenced at Sheffield Crown Court to life with a minimum of 26 years. His father, Mohammed Jhangur, was separately convicted of the offence of perverting the course of justice, coming from his act of nicking the knife off his boy and trying to hide it, and he got a 6-month sentence, suspended for 2 years.
Yeah. So we'll leave that there. What the fuck? I haven't murdered nobody.
There's no suspicion, yeah?
Suspicion? I haven't killed no one. What are you talking about?
Sir, you've been cautioned.
On the 6th of May 2025, 59-year-old Peter Augustine battered to death 87-year-old John Mackey in Seven Sisters Road, Manor House, North London, for a box of cornflakes, a pint of milk and a saveloy sausage. At about 5 p.m. on the said date, John Mackey, a frail man who walked with a stick, left his flat and made his way to the Co-op in Seven Sisters Road. He bought a box of cornflakes, a pint of milk and a copy of the Daily Mirror. Then he made his way to a takeaway shop and bought a saveloy sausage and some chips. He packed everything away carefully in his black hold-all bag before making his way slowly back towards his flat. Augustine watched Mr. Mackey all the time that he was in the takeaway shop. The man told the jury of his trial that he was hungry and wanted a kebab. He had thought of going in and just grabbing one and running away, but there were police cars about, so he decided not to do that. I don't think he would have been able to do any such thing anyway, because they don't leave kebabs ready-made in places where a person can just grab and go, unless this was an exceptional kebab shop where they do that. Anyway, instead of doing a grab and go, the perpetrator follows John Mackey for some distance as he made his way home. He waited until John entered a secluded space in the park that was ringed with hedges, and then he pounced on the poor old man. There were no witnesses to the start of the attack, but there were witnesses who saw the later part of it. They described seeing Augustine punching Mr. Mackey repeatedly with considerable force, and one of them heard the man shouting, "Give me the bag! Give me the bag!" Another also saw what he described as a stomping movement by Augustine as he stood over John Mackey. John had suffered multiple areas of impact trauma to the head, neck and body. He had external bruising and abrasions, deep muscle bruising, 2 rib fractures and a bleed on the brain. He died from his injuries on the 8th of May 2025. The judge of Augustine's trial said that she thinks that what happened was that Augustine tried to grab John's bag, but John hung onto it, and that made Augustine really angry, leading him to start battering the poor old man with such extreme force, far more than what he needed to use in order to steal the bag. So it became not just an act of robbery, it became an act of revenge. Augustine's conduct during the trial demonstrated that he is a man incapable of controlling his temper. He refused to attend the trial for much of the time, but when he was in the courtroom, he was disruptive, shouting angrily from the dock on a regular basis. He was insulting, abusive and aggressive when prosecution counsel attempted to challenge his account of events. His behaviour was so extreme that after repeated warnings, the judge had to take the rare step of kicking him out of court, despite the fact that the man was in the middle of giving evidence. The man didn't come to court for his sentencing, alleging that he had severe back pain. He gave that same excuse on various days during the trial because, as I've mentioned, he skipped a lot of days. However, repeated inquiries with the healthcare unit at HMP Belmarsh confirmed that the man's back pain was being controlled by painkillers and that the man was fit to attend court. The antagonist clearly just didn't want to go.
The defendant's decision not to attend may in fact be some relief to the family of John Mackey, because the defendant's disruptive conduct during the trial was, I know, a source of great distress to them.
In the course of the trial, the defendant's legal team arranged for him to be assessed by a psychiatrist, but you'll never guess what, Augustine refused to go to the appointment. There's nothing in the man's medical records to show that he has ever been engaged with any form of mental health services. The perpetrator was born on the 25th of October 1966. When he was much younger, he was convicted of offences involving serious violence, including robbery and causing grievous bodily harm with intent. He wasn't convicted of any further offences for more than 2 decades, but since 2016, he's been convicted of racially aggravated public order offences, assault, criminal damage and theft. John Mackey had lived in North London for 70 years and was well known locally for his trademark trilby hat, his close family relationships and his love of Arsenal Football Club. Speaking of close family relationships, John Mackey had no children of his own, but he had 22 nieces and nephews who adored him. His niece, Patricia, spoke on behalf of all the nieces and nephews in court, saying, quote, "Uncle John was the perfect uncle. Funny, charming, mysterious, and definitely mischievous. He always had a twinkle in his eye, dressed immaculately, and was never seen without one of his many trilby hats. He was interested in our lives, taking us to see his beloved Arsenal or introducing us to the pups of his home patch, Manor House in Finsbury Park. Family was everything to John. He was never happier than when he was with his brothers and sisters, as he was one of 11. There was always so much laughter and storytelling when they were together." In her sentencing of the perpetrator, the judge, Sarah Whitehouse KC, was scathing towards the man.
There are very significant aggravating factors present here. The robbery is an aggravating feature of the murder. John Mackey was particularly and obviously vulnerable because of his age and limited mobility. He was also in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease. I have no doubt that the defendant targeted him specifically because he was frail. It was a cowardly attack. The defendant has shown no remorse. Excessive violence was used against John Mackey. He must have suffered pain and fear during an attack that lasted for several seconds and which was accompanied by loud shouting on the part of the defendant, such as he displayed in court in the course of the trial. The defendant's previous convictions for offences involving violence are an aggravating factor, although I bear in mind that some of them were committed many years ago. and none of them is as grave as this attack. There is little in the way of mitigation. I cannot be sure that the defendant intended to kill John Mackie, but punching a frail elderly man, especially to the head, is inherently very dangerous, and so there is little mitigation in that. The robbery falls into the highest level of culpability because very significant force was used by the defendant. The harm caused is also plainly at the highest level. The starting point, if the robbery stood alone, is accordingly 8 years, with a range of 7 to 12 years imprisonment. The defendant falls to be sentenced today for murder and for robbery. He has also been committed to this court for sentence for a separate offence of theft, having been convicted in his absence in the Magistrates' Court. The simple facts of that matter are that on the 3rd of May of 2025, the defendant stole a backpack containing a mobile telephone while its owner was playing baseball a short distance away. The sentence I passed for the theft committed on the 3rd of May of 2025 is one of 4 weeks' imprisonment. The sentence I passed for the robbery of John Mackie is one of 8 years' imprisonment. Those two sentences have been taken into account in setting the minimum term for the offence of murder.
On the 28th of November 2025 at the Old Bailey, Paul Augustine got life with a minimum of 23 years.
So you understand what has gone on. Yeah. Your face has been released in the news under a murder investigation. All right. So at this time of the moment, it's 1950. You are under arrest for murder. Okay.
At the New Year fireworks display in Primrose Hill, North London on New Year's Eve 2023, 16-year-old Areece Lloyd-Hall stabbed to death 16-year-old Harry Pittman after a row broke out when Harry accidentally bumped into another teenager while playing a game. Harry and friends had gone to Primrose Hill together and had been in high spirits, drinking and smoking cigarettes. Before the attack, Harry had been speaking to random members of the public and a police officer on duty in the park. But frivolity turned swiftly to tragedy when Harry was playing a game with a friend by trying to see how high he could kick. He was aiming at the hand of one of the girls nearby, which she was holding up in the air. He became unbalanced and knocked into one of the group behind them. The teenager who had been bumped into reacted angrily, and his friend, Lloyd-Hall, who was there with his girlfriend, his sister and a small group of friends, then waded into the fight that subsequently broke out. The streets of Primrose Hill were filled with cars and pedestrians on the night as Londoners of all ages came out to mark New Year. Harry, who grew up in Tottenham and was a pupil at St Thomas More Catholic School in Wood Green, had stepped in as a peacemaker earlier in the evening when one of his friends, who was drunk, got into an altercation with another person. This poor young man just was not a violent person. He liked peace, not violence. Lloyd-Hall, who comes from Westminster, discarded the knife and his clothes and his phone after doing what he did. However, he left behind the sheath to the knife, which had his DNA on it. From the sheath, it was determined that the knife was most probably a hunting knife with a 15-centimetre blade, the perpetrator having been carrying it in his waistband. Having bought the knife from a friend of his a few weeks before, in fact, Lloyd-Hall had since got into the habit of carrying it on the street as it made him feel powerful and invincible. In court, the youth denied that that was his reason for carrying the weapon in public, claiming rather that it was for protection against violence from others, even saying that he especially needed it on the night in question since he'd been planning to go to Camden Town later to see another fireworks display and knew that there were gangs in the area. The judge, though, Mr Justice Kavanagh, counter-argued that the youth didn't live anywhere near that area and had no reason to think that he would be a target of gang violence. The judge also asserted that, quote, "You stabbed Harry because you lost your temper with him and you acted like a big man in front of your friends," unquote. And he also said that the perpetrator didn't care if Harry lived or died in the moments after the stabbing.
You claimed at trial that you stabbed Harry in self-defence and in defence of your sister and your friends. The jury has rejected this defence. At the time when you inflicted the blow, your sister and friends were no longer in any danger from Harry. You were under no great threat. You had just received one flailing punch. In any event, Even if you had felt under threat, it was grossly disproportionate to stab Harry with a knife, let alone in the neck. He was unarmed, and you confirmed in your evidence that you had no reason to think he had a knife or other weapon. You could simply have gone backwards out of reach. You could have approached one of several police officers who were nearby for help, or you could have run away. You stabbed Harry because you lost your temper with him, and you were acting the big man in front of your friends.
Jurors were no less told that Lloyd-Hall had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, and was suffering from cannabis-induced paranoia. The boy may also have suffered post-traumatic stress disorder triggered by witnessing the aftermath of an earlier stabbing and the loss of a friend to knife crime in June 2023, the same year then, and the judge himself actually alluded to that point. In mitigation, defence barrister David Bentley KC refers to a handwritten letter from Lloyd-Hall in which he had said, "I'm sorry for causing this, I honestly am." Mr Bentley said, he's not going to say it's not his fault. He now realises that at 16 he was a naive, immature, stubborn teenager who should have been seeking help for his problems. He also recognises that he has not only caused terrible trauma to Harry's family, but also to his own family. The judge paid a heartfelt tribute to Harry, describing him as boisterous and exuberant and somebody who was full of charm.
Harry was an affectionate young man with strong family values and morals. Harry was the heart and soul of his family, full of fun, with a radiant smile and unwavering positivity. His infectious laughter and boundless energy filled the family home with joy, and he was adored by his parents and by his siblings. He had a big heart and was a natural entrepreneur. As I've said, Harry was very popular, and his warm and outgoing personality meant that he had many friends, including a tight-knit group of lifelong friends.
On the 10th of November 2025 at the Old Bailey, Lloyd-Hall got life, which for those whose offence came before they turned 18 is called detention at His Majesty's pleasure, and his minimum term is 16 years.
Now you're back on British soil. There's been a warrant issued by Chelmsford Magistrates Court in relation to the murder of Robert Powell. So therefore I'm arresting you under that warrant on suspicion of murder. Okay? You don't have to say anything, but it may have been offence. Don't mention your own questions something later on in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. And the time is 20:43.
The very day when 41-year-old Temitope Adeyinka, who comes from Stratford, East London, was sentenced for manslaughter, even though he didn't lay a finger on his victim, I'll soon explain why he was still convicted of manslaughter, was the very day when his victim, Robert Powell, would have turned 55. It was the 13th of November 2025. Father of 3 and grandfather of 2, Robert Powell, 50, was shot 7 times as he left a house in Roydon near Harlow in Essex on the 13th of June 2020 at the end of a party. He suffered 15 wounds from the 7 shots outside Hill's house in Water Lane, Roydon at 4:47 a.m. on the 13th of June. He died the following day in hospital. The bullets were fired from a 9mm Luger semi-automatic pistol, and 1 bullet knocked the gold grille from his mouth. His 2 adult sons were with him at the time, prosecutor Justine Rouse KC remarking at trial that, quote, "it must have been a terrifying spectacle to witness," unquote. Robert managed musicians, including rapper Dachavelli, who had a top 10 track with Stormzy. If Adeyinka didn't shoot him dead, who did? I can't trace the reasons for the animosity that drug dealer and career criminal Nana Oppong, 45, harboured towards Robert, but that same animosity was shared by fellow drug dealer Isra Shah, 41. But at trial, the judge said that the fact that Shah and Oppong were both drug dealers gave them a live motive to murder Robert, and that's all I can tell you about the motive. In other words, basically nothing, except that it was very probably, according to the judge, drug-related. Having 9 previous convictions, on getting out of prison in December 2019, 5 or 6 months before the murder of Robert Powell, Adeyinka turned his back on drug dealing. However, he had since become a close friend of none other than Opong. That said, while he was undoubtedly aware that Opong had it in for Robert, he only found out about Opong's plans to attack the man on the day that the murder took place. At about 1:30 a.m. on the morning of the 13th of June, when Opong learnt of the location of the party that Robert had gone to, Opong, Shah and Adeyinka all drove north as part of the team that was assembling itself, the members being spread across a Ford Cougar and a Vauxhall Zafira. By the time they arrived at the party, according to the prosecution, Adeyinka was fully aware that Robert was to be attacked, but didn't necessarily know that a gun was to be used in the planned attack, meaning that he didn't necessarily know that the planned attack was intended to be fatal. Adeyinka's knowing and willing role, however, was, with Shah, to act as a lookout for Robert and tell the other team members where the man was, which is exactly what both he and Shah did. After the murder of Robert Powell, Adeyinka legged it out of the country and managed to dodge the police for years. His luck ran out in May 2024 though, when he was arrested while in hiding out in Malaga, South Spain. This was the same month in which Opong got life with a minimum of 38 years for Robert's murder, while Shah got life with a minimum of 26 years for the murder.
The magistrates at Chelmsford Magistrates Court have issued a warrant for your arrest, and that's in relation to a murder, possession of a firearm with intent to endanger life, and wounding with intent.
Just confirm your name for me. Israel Shah. Cool. Israel Shah. Time's 2 minutes to 4. Okay, you're under arrest for first instance warrant relating to the murder of Robert Powell.
In the law of England and Wales, an accomplice to a crime can be treated like the principal offender and suffer the same criminal penalties as the principal offender. This is why Shah, who, like Adeyinka, didn't physically attack Robert in any way, was no less convicted of murder. He got a much less sentence than Opong though, so presumably Opong was the one who pulled the trigger. I believe that Adeyinka escaped a murder conviction because, unlike Opong and Shah, he didn't necessarily know, as I mentioned earlier, that the plan was to go as far as killing Robert. As Adeyinka's conviction is for manslaughter, the judge had a choice about giving him a life sentence, unlike with a murder conviction, and he chose not to give him one such sentence, but still gave him 19 years. Whether Adeyinka will have to do the full sentence, time will tell. A sentence for manslaughter, you see, usually comes with the possibility of early release in exchange for an extended licence period. Adeyinka was sentenced you know when at Woolwich Crown Court.
I'm Detective Chief Inspector Tom Woodward of South Yorkshire Police's Major Crime Unit. I was a Senior Investigating Officer for the murder of Sheldon Jameson. Recently, at Sheffield Crown Court, Jason Hale was sentenced to life imprisonment for Sheldon's murder.
Of the two stabbings that 37-year-old Jason Hale, who comes from Doncaster in the East Riding of Yorkshire, carried out in September 2024, one was fatal. The perpetrator armed himself with a knife before fatally attacking Sheldon Jameson, 42, in an alleyway on the 19th of September 2024. The man had also stabbed another man in the exact same location, in the exact same circumstances, on the 17th of September, but that man had survived and he later gave evidence. CCTV footage showed Hale loitering around the alleyway on the nights of both attacks, leading to him being referred to during the trial as the lurker in the shadows. Sentencing Hale, recorder Jeremy Richardson KC told the court that while the 37-year-old claimed that he had acted in self-defence on both occasions, the fact that he had committed strikingly similar attacks over the course of 2 days, and the fact that the victim's injuries were so forceful meant that that suggestion was fanciful. And also, the judge pointed out that Mr. Jameson, the one who died, was unarmed. Mr. Richardson, the judge, told Hale that the CCTV doesn't reveal a man acting in fear. The evidence is compelling. You have an easy way with knives and the two attacks are almost identical. The court had also heard that Hale had tried to dispose of a knife in his toilet and another knife was found in his jogging bottoms after he had been arrested. It emerged during the trial that Hale had previously threatened Mr. Jameson and others, warning that he would blade them up. Hale had been under the influence of drugs during the attacks and was possibly attempting to buy more. During the sentencing hearing, Mr. Richardson told Hale, "The backdrop to this appalling criminality is drug taking and drug peddling. It underpins so much criminality in our country, and it unquestionably forms the backdrop to your serious violence." Prosecutor Charlotte Baines read out a victim impact statement from Mr. Jameson's father, whose name is Gordon, in which he said his son was kind-hearted despite his struggles with drugs. "I will never recover from the news that Sheldon was murdered. He comes from a big family, so it has affected a lot of people." That was a statement from Gordon, Mr. Jameson's father. And Gordon also said, quote, "He was not just an addict, he was only 42 and will never get married or have children now. Sheldon was not just my son, he was my best friend," unquote. On the 20th of November 2025 at Sheffield's Crown Court, Hale, of no fixed abode, got life with a minimum of 23 years. He was also jailed for 8 years for attempted robbery and 9 years for wounding with intent to cause GBH, both those sentences to run concurrently with his life sentence. If this video has gripped you, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.